location. Israel was spiritually significant because when God makes this covenant with Abraham, one of the things he tells us is that the boundaries that he promises to Abraham is actually the same boundaries as the Garden of Eden. So God was actually restoring everything that was lost through the fall, through the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that was going to be for the Jewish people, but also for the spiritual sons and daughters of Abraham who are going to believe through Yeshua, Jesus, as the Messiah. So that's where it all began. God created from there. God put the first man and woman there. And that's why God speaks from that place. It's interesting that the rabbis say this, that there are different lands whose soil is good for producing different types of crops. Some for grapes, like France or Italy. But they say, what is the land most fertile for in Israel? It's for revelation, for producing prophets and people who connect and hear God's voice in the most unique way.
And it was the center of the world at the time, wasn't it? It was an ancient trade route from the north to the south that everybody had to travel. So the word would go forward from that as well.
Ezekiel 5:5 says this. It says, "This is Jerusalem, placed in the center of the nations." So literally in the ancient world, Israel was geographically centered in a way that was very strategic, because there was two main empires and cultures of the ancient world that shaped all of ancient history. One was Egypt in the south, and the Egyptian culture and the pharaohs and the pyramids and the technology and the wonders of the world. And the other was in the north, was Mesopotamia, Babylon, for example. And so these were the ones that were bringing technology and culture to the world. But in order to connect Asia and Africa, the land bridge was Israel, because you couldn't go through the Arabian desert. And so there was one way around. The easiest way around was through this little strip of land, which becomes the land of Israel, the land of Canaan.
First time I was there, I visited the West Coast, of course, which is the Mediterranean Sea.
Right.
So beautiful. And saw for the first time the ancient road called the Via Maris.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Via Maris.
Yeah, the Via Maris was one of the most significant trade routes, again, from Mesopotamia down through Damascus, in through the land of Israel, ultimately down into Egypt. And you had key cities in Israel that were along those trade routes that protected those trade routes. So they were very significant, but it was also, again, it's hard to travel when there's not roads. So because of the trade route, there was a road system which made, again, getting messages, getting information, getting goods, very easily because of the trade route.
In the Bible, we learn that God called a man named Abram to follow him, to become the father of a nation. And he promised this land to Abram and his descendants. What can you tell us about this promise or this covenant with Abram?
Yeah, God makes this covenant with Abraham, and he says, to you and to your seed, to your descendants, I'm going to give this land. But Abraham was kind of nervous about the covenant, because most ancient covenants were more what we would consider contracts. And what that means is that both sides had stipulations in the agreement that they had to fulfill. And if one side failed to meet those stipulations, then the contract was null and void, and there was consequences for the side that broke it, which could be very severe, even potentially the loss of one's life as a result of that. And so Abram was concerned because he knew that all fall short and we all fail. And so he was concerned that his descendants would ultimately not be faithful to follow God and be obedient to everything that God would ask of them. And as a result of that, he was concerned that they would wind up forfeiting the promise as a result.
So what happened then?
Yeah. And so what's significant is you read about this in Genesis 15, that God comes down and he makes what is known as the covenant between the parts. And he tells Abraham to lay out these different sacrifices. And then God calls a deep sleep to fall upon Abraham. And the Lord passes through these parts like a fiery torch and a smoking oven. Could you imagine what then terror comes upon?